There would be no wedding that night. I said it into a microphone, and my own voice sounded like it belonged to someone braver than me. The ballroom, which had been humming with string quartet music and the clink of champagne glasses only a moment before, went completely silent. Marcus, the man I had been engaged to for 14 months, stopped smiling mid-sentence. His mother's mouth fell open. And at the family table near the front, my mother sat frozen, her hands knotted together in her lap like she was praying for the floor to open beneath her chair. Minutes earlier, Marcus's aunt had called her a pathetic little widow from nowhere. Marcus had laughed, I hadn't. I reached up, unclasped the ring from my finger, and set it down on the white tablecloth between the untouched wedding cake and a centerpiece of white roses that had cost more than my mother made in a month. Then I looked at the man I was supposed to spend my life with. "I'm sorry," I said, quiet enough that only the people closest to us could hear, "but I can't marry someone who laughs while his family humiliates the woman who raised me." Somebody near the dance floor gasped. A chair scraped against the carpet behind me, and then I heard my mother's voice, small and pleading. "Please, honey, don't." I turned to face her. Her eyes were glassy, but she was still trying, out of sheer habit, to smile for the room. "Don't do this because of me." I crossed the space between us and took her hand in mine. "Mom," I said, "I'm not ending this because of you. I'm ending it because of what they just showed me about who they really are." My name is Clara Bennett, and for most of my life I believed love could survive nearly anything: poverty, grief, distance, hard years. I grew up believing that if you were patient and kind and gave people the benefit of the doubt, things would eventually work out. That night in the ballroom, I learned that some things aren't meant to be survived. They're meant to be walked away from. I was raised in a small town in Ohio by my mother, Eleanor, in a house that never had central air conditioning and a car that broke down more often than it ran. My father died when I was 8 years old, and after that there was no inheritance waiting for us, no wealthy uncle, no safety net. There was only my mother. She worked the early shift at a grocery store, then cleaned office buildings 3 nights a week, and picked up weekend hours wherever she could find them. I have a memory, sharp as glass, of coming downstairs at 11 at night and finding her asleep at the kitchen table with her work shoes still on, a stack of unpaid bills spread out in front of her like a losing hand of cards. When I asked if she was tired, she'd blink herself awake, smile, and say the same thing every time. "A little tired is nothing, sweetheart. We have each other." She built our entire childhood on that sentence. We have each other. It wasn't a slogan, it was survival. So when I met Marcus Whitfield in my early 30s, and he seemed to understand loyalty the way my mother had taught it to me, I let myself believe I had finally found my match. He was polished, well-spoken, confident in the easy way that comes from never once worrying about rent. His family owned a mid-sized construction and development company outside Columbus, along with a handful of commercial properties around the county. At first his parents were nothing but polite. It was only in small moments that something colder showed through the manners, his mother casually asking where my mother lived, his father wondering aloud, almost idly, what kind of property she owned. Whenever I mentioned it, Marcus would wave it off. "That's just how my family talks," he'd say. "Don't read into it." I wanted to believe him. I think, looking back, I needed to. By the time we got engaged, his family had more or less taken over the wedding. They chose the country club. They picked the caterer. They filled the guest list with business associates and relatives I'd never met. My mother never objected to any of it. She simply told me, in her usual way, "If it makes you happy, sweetheart, I'll wear whatever dress you pick out for me." I bought her a deep navy dress, simple and elegant, and the night of the wedding she looked more beautiful than anyone in that entire ballroom. She kept touching the small silver locket at her throat, the one my father had given her when they were young and broke, and still had their whole lives ahead of them. Watching her from across the room, I remember thinking that no diamond in that building could compete with her. Then came the toasts. Marcus's aunt, Patricia, had been drinking since the ceremony ended. She was standing near the open bar with 2 of his cousins when I caught the edge of her voice carrying across the room. "Honestly," she said, loud enough to turn heads, "I still can't believe Clara's mother actually showed up." I turned. My mother was standing only a few feet away, close enough to hear every word. Patricia looked directly at her. You'd think she'd understand this isn't some little country potluck. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the nearby guests. My mother lowered her eyes to the floor, the way she used to when store managers spoke down to her, the way she'd trained herself to do decades ago just to get through a shift without losing her temper. I started walking toward them. Patricia wasn't finished. What do you expect, she said, louder now, playing to her small audience, from a pathetic little widow from nowhere. The laughter came again, sharper this time, and then from beside me, Marcus laughed too. Not a nervous chuckle, not an accident, a real, easy laugh like he'd heard a genuinely funny joke. He raised his champagne glass toward his aunt. Come on, Aunt Pat, you're terrible, he said, but he said it smiling, the way you scold someone you secretly agree with. That smile did something to me. It's strange how a single expression on someone's face can end a relationship faster than any argument ever could. I looked at my mother. She wasn't angry. That was the part that gutted me. She looked embarrassed, like she was the one who owed the room an apology for existing in it. I reached her side. Mom, are you okay? She nodded too quickly. I'm fine, you don't have to make a thing of it. She squeezed my hand hard. It's your wedding, honey, please don't make a scene. That sentence lodged itself somewhere behind my ribs, because it was exactly what my mother had done her entire life, swallow her own pain so that everyone around her could stay comfortable. I had watched her do it for 26 years. I could not watch her do it one more time. I turned to Marcus. Did you hear what she said to my mother? He shrugged, already reaching for his drink. Clara, it was a joke, she didn't mean anything by it. She called my mother pathetic, and you laughed. His expression shifted, a flicker of irritation. Don't start this tonight. Tonight, as if defending the woman who raised me was an inconvenient scheduling conflict, as if the seating chart mattered more than her dignity. I looked around the room. 200 people were watching us now, some confused, some clearly enjoying the drama, a few looking genuinely uncomfortable. I walked to the small stage where the band had set up, picked up the microphone from its stand, and turned to face the crowd. I'm sorry, I said. The room fell quiet almost instantly. There will be no wedding tonight. Marcus came toward me, panic finally breaking through his composure. Clara, don't do this. I slid the ring off my finger and set it on the tablecloth. I mean it. His mother rose halfway out of her chair. You are humiliating this family, in front of everyone we know. I met her eyes. No, I said, your family did that all on its own. Then I took my mother's hand, and together we walked out of that ballroom while 200 people watched in silence. I expected tears in the parking lot. I expected anger. What I didn't expect was what my mother said once we reached the car. She looked at me, eyes shining under the streetlight, and whispered, I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better life. I pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. You gave me my life, I told her. That's more than enough. That night, I believed I had simply escaped a bad marriage. I had no idea I had also escaped something far more dangerous. And the next morning, an email I almost deleted would show me exactly why Marcus's family had wanted this wedding so badly. It arrived at 6:14 the next morning, sitting in my inbox like a small, unremarkable landmine. The sender was a law office I didn't recognize. The subject line read, regarding property documentation. Normally, I would have skimmed it and moved on. That morning, something made me stop. I opened it. The message was brief and formal. The firm explained they had received instructions concerning a property transaction connected to my upcoming marriage, and they wanted to confirm several details before proceeding. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, my stomach turning colder with each pass. I had never authorized any property transaction. I had never agreed to sell anything. I had certainly never hired a lawyer to prepare documents tied to my marriage. I called the number at the bottom of the email. A receptionist answered, Good morning, Walsh and Greer. This is Clara Bennett. I received an email this morning about property documentation, and I don't understand what it's referring to. A pause. One moment please, Ms. Bennett. A man's voice came on the line a moment later. Ms. Bennett, this is Robert Walsh. I apologize for reaching out unexpectedly. What can I clarify for you? What property are you talking about? Another pause, longer this time. The Bennett family parcel. My stomach dropped. My mother's property. Yes. I don't understand. I never authorized anything. He explained, carefully and a little too diplomatically, that his office had been asked to review documents related to a potential transfer of ownership following my marriage. I almost laughed out loud, not because any of it was funny, but because it was so absurd. I'm not transferring my mother's land to anyone. He went quiet for a moment. Then I think you need to speak with your fiance. I thanked him and hung up, staring at my phone for several long seconds before I dialed Marcus. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. A few minutes later my phone buzzed with a text. We need to talk, I wrote. Clara, about the property, he replied. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, disappeared. Finally, who told you about that? That single question told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan I hadn't been let in on. I drove straight to my mother's house. She was sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee out of the same chipped blue mug she'd owned for as long as I could remember. She took one look at my face and set the mug down. What happened? I placed my phone on the table between us. Mom, what property are they talking about? She didn't answer right away. She looked toward the window instead, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw something like fear cross her face. You weren't supposed to find out about this yet. My chest tightened. Find out about what? She took a slow breath, the kind that comes before a confession that's been rehearsed 1,000 times in someone's head and never once said out loud. Your father left us more than you ever knew. I sat down across from her. What do you mean? She explained that after my father died, she'd been left with a stack of debts and one small, mostly worthless parcel of land on the edge of town. She'd sold nearly everything else they owned just to keep us fed and housed, but she had refused, again and again, to sell that particular piece of land. It was the only thing left that belonged to your father, she said quietly. He asked me to hold on to it. He said one day it might matter. I remembered that land vaguely, trees, weeds, a gravel road we used to pass on long drives when I was small. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't want you growing up thinking that land made us special, she said, smiling sadly. I wanted you to learn how to work, how to stand on your own, how to treat people, no matter what you had or didn't have. Then why does Marcus's family want it? Her hands tightened around the mug. They came to me a few months ago. My pulse started climbing. What did they want? They said they were developing land nearby. They wanted to buy mine. And you said no. I said no. Why? She hesitated, then finally met my eyes. Because what they offered wasn't a fair price. How much? $280,000. I stared at her, for that little piece of land. It's worth considerably more now, she said simply. Something clicked into place. A comment Marcus had made months earlier, almost in passing, about a new highway interchange going in near his family's latest project, a medical complex, new retail construction planned for the area. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time. My mother apparently had thought about little else. Marcus knows this, I said, more to myself than to her. I don't know what Marcus knows, she said, but I know what his family wants. And then, one by one, a year's worth of small, harmless-seeming questions came rushing back to me. His mother, asking whether my mother had ever thought about selling. His father, asking if she had a will. Marcus himself once, asking whether my mother planned to leave the land to me someday. At the time I'd thought nothing of it. Now every question felt like a piece of a much larger machine. I called Marcus again. This time he picked up. Clara, what did your family know about my mother's land? Silence stretched on the other end. Then, yesterday was already a disaster. Can we not do this right now? I asked you a question. I know about the development. That isn't what I asked, Marcus. Did you know? Another silence. My family's been trying to acquire that parcel. And you knew? Oh, yes. Something inside me went very still. How long? I don't know, Clara, months. And you were going to marry me, without ever telling me that. That isn't fair, he said, his voice climbing. You're acting like I planned some kind of conspiracy against you. Then explain the lawyer's email. The paperwork was preliminary, nothing was finalized. Who was supposed to sign it? He didn't answer. Marcus, who was supposed to sign. Finally, quietly, your mother. I looked at my mother across the table. She had heard enough of my side of the conversation to understand exactly what was being said. Did you ever ask her to sign anything? I said into the phone. I asked her to consider a deal. Did you tell her what the land was actually worth? I don't know the exact number, Clara. That was when I remembered the other document, the standard financial agreement Marcus had asked me to sign a few months before the wedding, and I had postponed because I wanted my own lawyer to look it over first. He'd been irritated by the delay. Now I wondered what else had been buried inside those pages. I found the file in my email and opened it. The language was dense, but one clause jumped out immediately, something about assets acquired, transferred, or contributed during the marriage. My mother's land wasn't named directly, but if she ever transferred it to me after the wedding, this agreement would have quietly folded it into everything Marcus and I shared. I forwarded it to a lawyer before I did anything else. I'm getting independent legal advice, I told my mother. She nodded, good. Are you angry with me for pushing on this? She looked almost offended by the question. No, why would I be? Because you're finally asking questions, she said, reaching for my hand. That's a lesson I should have taught you a long time ago. What lesson? That love matters, she said. But so does knowing when someone is asking for your trust without ever giving you a reason to give it. That afternoon, my attorney called. His name was David Reyes, and his voice had the calm, unhurried quality of a man who'd spent decades watching people make expensive mistakes. Clara, I've reviewed the agreement. My stomach clenched, and I wouldn't sign it. There are provisions in here you need to understand before you marry anyone. I looked toward my mother's kitchen window, and for the first time, wondered whether the disaster at the wedding had actually spared me from something far worse. Then David said the sentence that changed everything. There's another document attached to this file. What document? A purchase authorization involving your mother. I froze. That's impossible. That's what concerns me, he said quietly. He sent it over that afternoon. I opened it at my mother's kitchen table. The first page looked ordinary enough, a property description, a parcel number, a proposed purchase price. Then I saw her name, Eleanor Bennett. Beneath it, what appeared to be her signature. I turned the laptop toward her. That's not your signature, I said. She leaned in, and her expression changed instantly. She pushed the laptop away like it had burned her. No, she said, I never signed that. David had warned me not to accuse anyone yet, not to contact Marcus's family, not to post anything, not to do anything until the document had been verified. I trusted him, but I needed the whole story from my mother first. Tell me everything, I said. She was quiet for a long moment before she finally spoke. Your father bought that land in 1994. I remembered the year. It was written on the back of an old photograph in our hallway, my father standing next to a small farmhouse with my mother beside him and me, as a toddler holding a red bicycle. He believed the town would grow eventually, she continued. He used to say that land might be worth something someday. Why didn't you sell it after he died? You needed the money. Because he asked me not to, her eyes glistened. He left me a note before he passed. He knew he was running out of time. He wrote Linda, that was what he called me, even though it wasn't my name, some old joke between us, if you can hold on to that land, hold on to it. One day Clara might need it. My throat closed, She had kept that promise through layoffs, through medical bills, through Christmases when we couldn't afford presents, through years of double shifts. She never sold it, not once. What happened when Marcus's family came to you? They came to the house. His father, his brother, and a man from the company. What did they offer? 280,000. That's nowhere near what it's actually worth. I know. How much is it worth, Mom? Your lawyer will tell you better than I can. David had already run the numbers based on the development plans in the area. When he called back later that day, he gave me the figure. Nearly $2.8 million. I couldn't speak. The number didn't feel real. My mother had never once lived like a woman sitting on nearly $3 million. She still compared unit prices at the grocery store. She still rinsed and reused plastic containers. She still drove a car older than most of my coworkers. I thought of Patricia's voice at the wedding, a pathetic little widow from nowhere. My hands curled into fists at my sides. My mother noticed. Don't let their words change who you are, she said. I don't care what they called me. I do, I admitted. She smiled faintly, then be angry for 5 minutes. I almost laughed despite everything. 5 minutes. 5 minutes is enough to feel she said. After that, you decide what you're actually going to do about it. That was my mother in a single sentence. She had survived losing her husband. She had survived raising a child completely alone. She had survived being underestimated by nearly everyone she'd ever met. She wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in doing the smart thing. David called again that evening. I had the signature compared against several of your mother's verified documents. It doesn't match. My pulse spiked. Are you saying it was forged? I'm saying it appears inconsistent with her authentic signature. I want a forensic examiner to confirm it before we say that officially. Who prepared the document? A firm affiliated with Whitfield Development Group. I closed my eyes. The pieces were locking into place whether I wanted them to or not. What happens if it's proven fake? That depends entirely on who created it and how it was used, David said. But don't get ahead of the facts yet. He was right, I needed evidence, not assumptions. That evening, Marcus showed up at my mother's front door. I almost didn't let him in. My mother surprised me. Let him talk, she said. He walked into the kitchen looking like a different man than the one who'd stood beside me at the altar 2 days earlier. His suit wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Clara, I never wanted any of this to happen. I said nothing. He sat down across from us. My family's been trying to buy that land for almost a year. I know that now. I didn't realize they were going to pressure your mother directly. You didn't realize, I repeated flatly. I knew they wanted the property, he admitted. I thought they'd make her a fair offer. She told you they offered $280,000 for land worth 10 times that. He swallowed hard. I didn't know the exact number, but I knew it was worth more than they were offering. He had no answer for that. My mother finally spoke. Did you know about the document with my signature on it? He looked at her, genuinely confused. What document? I turned the laptop around and showed him the page. He stared at it for a long moment, and something in his face, a slackening, a real shock made me believe, at least in that instant, that he hadn't known. I've never seen that in my life. Are you sure? Yes, I swear to you, Clara, I didn't forge anything. I believed that part, but there was still something else sitting between us, heavier than any forgery. Did you ever plan on telling me? I asked. He hesitated. I was going to, after the wedding. My mother closed her eyes. I looked at him. That tells me everything I need to know. No, Clara, please. You wanted me married first, I said. Married and locked into that agreement before I ever had a reason to ask questions. I loved you. Maybe you did, I said, but you loved your family's approval more. He didn't deny it. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, My father told me the whole project could fail without that land. There it was, not the entire truth, but enough of it. What happens if they don't get it? We lose the development contract. How much money are we talking about? He hesitated again. Millions. My mother stood slowly from the table. So that's what my daughter was worth to your family, a signature on a piece of paper. No, ma'am, Marcus said, but that's how they treated her, I know that now. He had no defense for it, and he didn't try to build one. By the following Monday, I had stopped thinking of any of this as a family disagreement. It was something far bigger than that. David had spent the entire weekend combing through the documents connected to my mother's land, and he'd made it very clear. Don't contact Marcus's family, don't make accusations, don't post anything online. Let the facts speak first. So I waited. Waiting turned out to be the hardest part. Marcus called 11 times that Sunday. I didn't answer once. His mother left 3 voicemails, the first furious, the second tearful, the third almost pleading. I listened to all of them and responded to none. Monday morning, David asked me to come into his office. I brought my mother with me. His office sat in a quiet brick building downtown, nothing flashy, exactly what you'd want from a man who'd spent his career quietly cleaning up other people's expensive mistakes. He slid a thick folder across the table. We've confirmed the signature isn't authentic. My mother went very still. You're cert? Yes. She closed her eyes for a long moment, and I thought she might cry. Instead, she simply exhaled. What happens now? Now we find out exactly who created it, and who knew it was being used. The document, David explained, had come from an outside consulting firm hired directly by Whitfield Development. That firm had submitted it to a lender as part of the financial package for a large mixed-use project, apartment. Retail space, a medical office building. My mother's parcel wasn't the biggest piece involved, but it was strategically critical. Without it, the planned access road couldn't be completed as designed, and without that road, the entire project's value would drop sharply. How much are we talking about? I asked. Potentially millions, David said. My mother shook her head slowly. I never wanted any part of this. I know. Then why does it feel like I'm the one who caused all this trouble? I took her hand. You didn't cause anything, you just refused to be taken advantage of. David nodded. That distinction matters more than you'd think. He slid over the original purchase agreement, the same figure as before, $280,000, a fraction of what David now estimated the land was actually worth. They knew you didn't have the full picture, I said to my mother. She shrugged. They assumed I wouldn't ask questions. That afternoon, Marcus came to my apartment. This time, I let him in. He looked worse than before, not physically, but in some deeper way. The confidence that had defined him since the day I met him was simply gone. My father knows about the forged document, he said, standing near the door. Good. He's furious. He should be. Clara, I need you to understand something. His voice cracked slightly. I never asked anyone to forge your mother's signature. I believe that part. He looked up surprised. You do? Yes, I said, but I don't trust you, and those aren't the same thing. That landed harder than I expected it to. He sat down heavily. My father wanted that land for a year, he said. My brother kept telling him the whole project would fall apart without it. They kept saying that once we were married, it would all be simpler. That your mother would eventually come around, and then you'd end up contributing the land yourself, as part of what we shared. And you knew all of that? Yes. And you never told me. I thought I could handle it quietly, that it would resolve itself before it ever became a problem for you. You couldn't even stand up for my mother at our own wedding, Marcus. His face fell. I know I was wrong. You were, I said without softening it. My family convinced me your mother was being stubborn, unreasonable. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. My mother. They said she didn't understand business, he said quietly. She understands dignity. That's a language your family never bothered learning. I know that now. I stood up. Your family didn't make a mistake, Marcus. They made a choice. He said nothing. And you made yours, I said, when you laughed. He flinched like I'd struck him. I was trying to fit in. That isn't an excuse. No, he admitted, it isn't. After he left, I sat on the couch for a long time expecting to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt tired. Revenge sounds satisfying in the abstract. In practice, real people were caught in the middle of it, employees, investors, families who had nothing to do with any of this. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted the truth out in the open, and I wanted my mother's name and her land left alone. The next day, David called with an update. The lender's been notified the transaction is disputed. Financing is on hold until they can confirm the property can actually be acquired. I sat in silence for a moment. Then he added, there's more. What? We found an email from the consulting firm. It says your mother's signature was expected to be resolved after the marriage. I closed my eyes. After the marriage. The phrase echoed in my head for the rest of the day. They had assumed the wedding would happen. They had assumed I would marry Marcus without ever asking a single hard question. They had assumed my mother would eventually give in. They had assumed wrong on every count. 3 days later, Marcus's father requested a formal meeting. David advised against going alone, so I brought him, and my mother came too. We met in a downtown conference room. Marcus's father sat at the head of the table with his elder son beside him, two men who, only a week earlier, had looked completely untouchable. Now they looked exhausted and cornered. We want to resolve this, the father began. David folded his hands. Then start with the truth. What truth? The transaction was never authorized, David said evenly. Your firm submitted a forged signature to a lender. We believed Mrs. Bennett intended to sell, the father said. My mother finally spoke. I told your people no, more than once. You could have made a substantial amount of money. She smiled without any warmth in it. You offered me a fraction of what that land was worth. That isn't generosity. That's a bet that I wouldn't know better. The room went quiet. My mother reached into her purse and set a worn folder on the table. My husband bought that land 30 years ago, she said, placing the original deed beside it. He told me to hold on to it for our daughter. She looked directly at Marcus's father. I kept that promise. Nobody at the table had an answer for that. Finally, the father said, we made mistakes. Yes, my mother agreed. And we're prepared to be compensated for the inconvenience this has caused, if that's what you're offering. David leaned forward. We're not negotiating away her ownership. Then what exactly do you want? The father asked, frustration breaking through his composure. My mother answered simply, nothing, I want my property left alone. That was the entire request. No demand for damages, no attempt to destroy their company out of spite, just a boundary, stated plainly. They had walked into that room expecting greed, or at least leverage. Instead, they found a woman who only wanted to be left in peace. As we left the building, Marcus was waiting outside. He looked at his father, then at me. I'm sorry, he said just that. I believe you, I told him and meant it. That was the last real conversation we had for several weeks. In the weeks that followed, Whitfield Development quietly restructured. Investors backed out. The project was scaled down. Several planned buildings were canceled outright. The company survived, technically, but the enormous profit margin they'd built their plans around never materialized. Their world didn't collapse because I set out to destroy it. It collapsed because they built their entire future on assumptions, arrogance, and a piece of land that was never theirs to begin with. And the woman they had called a pathetic little widow from nowhere turned out to be the one person at that table who never once forgot what actually mattered. A few weeks later, Marcus sent me a letter, not a text, not an email, an actual handwritten letter. I almost didn't open it. Eventually, I did. I thought being loyal to my family meant agreeing with everything they did, he wrote. I understand now that loyalty without courage is just a nicer word for cowardice. He apologized for the laugh at the wedding, for hiding what he knew about the land. Most of all, he apologized to my mother, not for helping pursue the property, but for standing by while his family humiliated the woman who raised me and choosing silence out of fear of disappointing his father. At the bottom, he'd written, "You were right when you said I lost you because I didn't protect the people you loved. I hope one day I become someone who would." I folded the letter and kept it, not because I wanted him back. I kept it because an apology can be sincere even when the relationship it's attached to is still, rightly, over. About 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I ran into Marcus at a small coffee shop. He was sitting alone by the window. When he noticed me, he stood. "Hi, Clara's." "Hi." An awkward silence stretched between us before he finally asked, "How's your mother?" "She's good." He smiled and it looked genuine. "I'm glad." I could tell there was something else he wanted to ask, so I waited. "Would you ever consider starting over?" he finally said. The old version of me would have answered immediately, one way or another. The woman standing there that day took a long moment before she spoke. "I don't know," I said honestly. "If we ever did, it wouldn't be because I forgot what happened. I wouldn't want that. It would have to be because you've actually changed, and because I can trust you." "I understand," he said. We didn't make any promises that afternoon. We just said goodbye, and this time it didn't feel like an ending laced with anger. It felt like two people who had learned something the hard way. In the months after that, Marcus left the family business entirely and took a job at a much smaller construction company with no ties to his father. He started volunteering with a local veterans housing nonprofit on weekends. He stopped trying so hard to impress a man who had never once made him feel like enough, and slowly, he started becoming someone closer to the person I'd believed he was when we first met. One evening, he showed up at my mother's front door holding a small box of pastries. She opened the door, looked at him for several long seconds, and then stepped aside. "Come in." He looked surprised. "Thank you." They sat together at her kitchen table while I watched from the living room. After a few minutes, I heard him say, "Mrs. Bennett, I owe you an apology." "Yes," she said, "you do. I treated you like you were less important because you didn't have the kind of money my family had." She said nothing, letting him sit in it. "I was wrong," he said. She finally nodded. "That's a good place to start." Then she added, pouring him a cup of coffee, "But don't apologize because you want Clara back." "I don't," he said, "not for that reason." "Good, then apologize because you actually understand what you did." "I do." She smiled, small and satisfied. "Then we're finished her." "Me?" That was my mother's entire philosophy of reconciliation. No dramatic speeches. No tears for the sake of tears. Just an honest acknowledgement, a clear boundary, and a willingness to let people move forward if they'd genuinely earned it. Later that night, after Marcus left, my mother and I sat together on her porch the way we had 100 times before. "Do you think I should ever give him another chance?" I asked her. "That's not my decision to make," she said. "I know, but what do you think?" She smiled. "I think you're finally learning to ask the right questions before you commit yourself to someone. That's worth more than any answer I could give you." I laughed and squeezed her hand. "Clara," she said, turning serious, "don't ever choose a husband because his family has money." "I won't." "And don't reject someone just because his family doesn't have any." "I won't." "And don't marry someone because you feel sorry for him." I smiled. "Anything else?" "Yes," she said, looking directly at me. "Watch how he treats the people who can't do anything for him. That's the only test that ever really matters." I knew exactly what she meant. That lesson had cost me a wedding. It may well have saved me a marriage. Today my mother still lives in the same small house on the same quiet street. The land is still hers. She eventually sold off a small portion of it, entirely on her own terms and at a fair price, and used the money to pay off her mortgage and start college funds for a few of the younger kids in our extended family. She didn't buy a mansion. She didn't buy a new car. She didn't turn into someone unrecognizable. She just got a little more comfortable. When people ask her about the land now, she just smiles and says, "It's just land, but I know better than that." It represents 30 years of sacrifice, a promise kept between two people who loved each other completely, a mother's quiet determination, and a daughter's reminder that dignity is worth protecting, even when protecting it costs you a wedding in front of 200 people. I used to believe revenge meant making the people who hurt you suffer for it. I think differently now. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to become like the people who wronged you. You don't have to humiliate them. You don't have to hate them. Sometimes all you have to do is tell the truth, protect what's actually yours, and walk away with your head held high, letting other people live with the weight of their own choices. My mother taught me, without ever meaning to turn it into a lesson, that being poor is not shameful. That needing help is not shameful. That living simply is not something to apologize for. But treating another person as worthless simply because they have less than you, that is its own kind of poverty, and no amount of money in the world can fix it. If there's one thing I hope this story leaves you with, it's this. Pay close attention to how people treat the waiter, the cashier, the elderly neighbor, the relative who's struggling, or anyone they think has nothing to offer them in return. Because money will tell you what someone owns. Success will tell you what someone has achieved. But kindness, real, unwatched kindness, tells you exactly who someone actually is. If this story reminded you of someone who quietly sacrificed everything for you, take a moment today and tell them so. Call them. Sit beside them. Say thank you while you still can. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for someone you love, I hope you found the courage to choose the second one. Because sometimes the people who seem to have the least in the world are the ones who end up teaching us what real wealth actually looks like.